Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Dear devotees, as you know, Sydney Carlingford Amauthara Buddhist Center is conducting series of Dhamma sermon in this rain retreat. And I would like to thank Dr. Gamini and Mrs. Malkanti, their family, sponsoring for today's Dhamma sermon. Today's sermon is mainly about mindfulness meditation, and I am really happy to invite Most Venerable Somaloka Thero to continue his invaluable Dhamma sermon from now onward. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And
Goodness me. Okay, no? Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Yoga have jayati bhuri, ayoga bhuri sankai, etang vidam patang yatva, vibhaya avibhaya cha, tatattanam niveseya, yatha bhuri bhavandati. This is going to be very interesting. So let us first establish our ground rule. You don't know what I'm going to talk. And I don't know what I'm going to talk either. Okay? So what we're going to do, I'm just going to help you to get some benefit. I will first assure that you're not going to learn or hear anything special, useful. So what you need to do, just relax. So since you already know that you're not going to get anything, just try to observe your own reaction. Okay? If you can do that, and you get something, and that gives me the opportunity to keep on babbling whatever I will say. Okay? So that is the ground rule. First of all, I would like to thank the people, particularly Amauthara Buddhist community, who organized this series of Dhamma talk during this Vassana season. And the Vassana season is an interesting thing. It started during the Buddha's time. You know? So since that time, most of the Buddhist countries, especially Theravada Buddhist countries, have been continuing this beautiful practice. No? It gives the opportunity for the monks to practice more Dhamma and for Dayakas to come and listen to Dhamma and offer Dana. Do you know how it started? It's very interesting. In Buddha's time, as usual, monks used to go for the Pindapata. And this particular period, Vassana period, the word says, rain season, monsoon in India, heavy rain. So the monks, Buddhist monks, still had to go for Pindapata. So they're walking in the mud and water, come back with the wet robes, whatnot. And then while the other religious people were living in the ashram and practicing meditation. And their dayakas come on with the dana. So the Jaina monks saw this. They see this Buddha's disciple are a little bit reckless. Because they just keep on treading on the mud and even though unconsciously causing little creatures to be killed. So when that message came to the Buddha, he thought it was quite a constructive criticism, comment. And then he told the monks, from now on, you two stay at the temple and practice the Dhamma. So this practice started actually thanks to Jainas. And the Buddha, being what he was a very wonderful person. He always respected what is good and what is right, regardless of where I come from. And there are many sutras I find with the said, Ati Bhikkave Amenecha Anyecha Samana Brahmana. There are other religious people who are very advanced. We have to respect them, even though they may not lead to the same liberation that we are looking for. So he was a great person. He accepted that. And for, because of that reason, and we got this beautiful opportunity. Imagine it, in the Buddha's time, most of the Buddhist countries, particularly in Sri Lanka, a lot of ceremonies keep on going on. People are accumulating a good merit. And I'm very grateful to Buddhist community here also, wherever outside the Buddhist countries, they continue this tradition. One of the most beautiful traditions. So having said that, let us see what we will talk. As I said, I don't know. Okay? Anyway, Dr. Chandra Perera, who invited me to give a talk today, said, I heard he was telling other Hamdro, it'd be nice to hear a little bit about the Zen Buddhism. And later, he told them he talk a little bit of mindfulness. So both subjects are not very easy to talk. No? The Zen Buddhism, I know many people have a bit of confused ideas. In the early 60s, late 60s, Zen Buddhism was quite popular in the West. But now, of course, our Tibetan Buddhism has taken over that. The Zen Buddhism actually started during the Buddha's time. Okay? The story goes, one day when the Buddha gave a Dhamma talk, and after that he took a lotus onto his hand. And then the Mahakashyapa Hamduru, who was listening to him, smiled. Okay? Then at that moment, Buddha said, this very moment, all the Dhammas that I have realized was transmitted to Mahakashyapa Hamduru. And he was supposed to be the then first Zen master. And the monk who brought the Zen Buddhism to China, called Buddha, he's supposed to be 28th patriarch. The Zen means very interesting. Zen is Chinese word, Chan. When it's translated to Japanese, it's called Zen. Both mean dhyana, mean meditation. That's a very special type of technique. As I said earlier, it is not something to talk about. It is something to get the direct experience. Instead of talking about Buddhism, the Zen Buddhism encourage their followers to see the Dhamma within. Like a Buddha said, yo Dhammam pasati, somam pasati. If you want to see me, you have to experience Dhamma. That is the essence of the Zen. But if you ask a Zen monk to come and give a Dhamma talk, you know what he would do? He might hit the table with a big stick, take off. And you might be thinking, wondering what the heck of Dhamma is that? Then he would tell you, it is up to you to sort it out. That's the way Zen Buddhism taught. You need to able to experience it. But I think that's exactly what the Buddha meant, isn't it? Because we know the Sutra, Buddha said in his process to become enlightened or searching for the freedom from suffering, and he accumulated, collected a lot of information through his process. But eventually he said, all I preach, like what I experienced, what I collected, it's like as much as the leaves in the jungle, at the forest. But what I taught you, this is like a handful of leaves. So that is enough for us to understand, to realize what the Buddha wanted to do. But today, of course, you know, Dhamma, even the Buddha said this handful of teaching in the written word, almost like a 45 volumes. It's almost like that handful of leaves being scattered back to the whole forest. So now we are struggling how to experience or go back to that root of Buddhist teaching. And that's what the Zen Buddhism also want to do. Instead of talking about it, try to get a little bit of experience of what this Dhamma would be. So how can we do that? As Buddhism says, Dhamma is within us. This is the most important factor that we need to understand. Dhamma is not outside. Dhammamattam bhikkhave kaleva. Within this fathom-sized body, Buddha said, I see the whole world, origin of the world, cessation of the world, as well as the path, the method to be free from that. All are right within. If you really understand that, you can see we can't understand Buddhism by reading, talking about it, or anything. You need to sit and learn to experience. I'm sure you must have heard that, no? Buddha said when the most important technique that Buddha offered us, Satipatthana. And the Buddha said in Satipatthana, monks, you know, here's the technique. Aranyagatua, Rukkumulagatua, Sunyada, find a suitable place, sit down, and just learn to observe within. So all this Dhamma within. The suffering is within, If you want to look at the Four Noble Truths, for example, suffering is within. Cause of the suffering is also within. The freedom of suffering also within. And the most importantly, the technique, the path to be free from that suffering, also right within. Can you see that? If it is within, all we need to learn how to see it within. It makes sense, isn't it? If everything right within, we need to learn to observe within. And that's what the whole Buddhist technique is all about. Wherever, whatever Buddhism taught, Buddha tried to direct our attention to see within. One of the famous, mostly frequently used statement in Buddhism, they said, Sati Sampajanyata Bhikkhave. Be mindful, be aware of things as they are. All the technique is to see things as they're starting within ourselves. This is how Buddhism also started with. It's interesting. Buddha was not a philosopher. And I don't think he has any interest in philosophy either. But he was a very keen observer. When you read the Buddha's life, you can see that. He had a very keen eye. He was observing, even though he was living with a very comfortable, luxurious life, he started to look around. He has a very keen eye. And he saw this interesting thing. People are born, they get old, they get sick, and they die. This vicious circle. Despite all the beautiful, luxury, happy around, inside we saw this phenomena going on. It's common to everybody, regardless of your socioeconomic status. Whether you are a king or better, you all go through this process. And he said, nobody actually tried to be free from it. It's interesting. He saw this. And he looked at around further. He said, look, I don't like this way of being. I don't like to get old. I don't want to be sick. But then the way how I deal with my life, I go around collecting and doing things which have the same nature. It's like a self-defeating game. And then he saw a little deeper. He said, Bahumve saranang yante abbathani vanancha aramarukkhan chetyani manusa bhaya tajjita. He said, the reality is behind this all happy go around, people are afraid. A lot of fear. And today we know very well how uncertain life is. Nothing predictable. No scientist can guarantee that we won't get sick. No guarantee there. Doesn't mean how sophisticated our technology, medical or anything, there's no guarantee. We're driven by a lot of fear. So we go anywhere, mountain, you name it, wherever we think we can get a little bit of security, happiness, we go for it. We underneath, we are very innocent. We are really frightened. But we don't know what else to do. So this is samsara. We keep on going round and round without knowing how to be free from this vicious circle of suffering. And this suffering from Buddhist point is not having or not having this existential anxiety, situation, the way we are. But fortunately, he thought there must be a solution to this. Life can't be just born, get sick and old and die. There must be something else. Life should be more meaningful. So he wanted to look for it. Instead of sitting and talking about it, he thought the best thing for me to do, I should go for people who are supposed to claim to know the way out of this. He got to see how humble person he must have been. So he looked around and he saw these famous teachers. So he went to them and he practiced them to the letter they asked him to do. He's completed their program. His earlier teacher like Alam Kalam, you must have heard them. And they were so happy with his achievement, he offered him to equal partnership in their teaching. Buddha said with tremendous gratitude, I'm very grateful for what you have offered me, but this is not what I'm looking for. I don't think this teaching that I have been practicing would really help me to be free from this suffering. So he left. And just imagine now, he left home because he knew ordinary way of being, looking after, running after pleasurable thing, not the solution. Because he had a direct experience. So he would never come back to that, thinking that is where the happiness is. Okay? I want you to really contemplate on that. Just follow his footstep a little bit. So he left home knowing that is not the way to be happy. So now he, after practicing with great teachers, and he found out that was not the way either. What would he think his situation would be? So finally he went to the Bodhi tree and he sat there. Now he wondering, where am I going from now on? And then he looked at his own body. It's a torture because he been practicing heavy austerities. And he neglected his own body. He didn't even care to eat because his mind was focused on that particular target. So the entertaining, taking care of the body was not the part of that. So he finally looked at and he saw now. I don't know what he was thinking. If I were him, I would be thinking, God, this is all I'm left with now. With this worn out innocent body. And then he started to breathe and breathe out. He said that at that moment, some of the very subtle memories of past incident dawned to him. I'm sure Buddhist people have heard this. He said when he was a little baby, his parents used to take him to farming ceremony, and left him in the cart because he's a little baby. He said while he was in the cart, his attention came to his breath. And when he focused on that breath, he had experienced some beautiful feeling. And so he thought that past memory came back to him. And then he started to observe his own breathing and breathing. From there, I think started the process path. It's interesting, isn't it? He couldn't find happiness through the sensory gratification, or he went to other Matana practicing any heavy austerities, just by being with himself, by observing his own being, he found out this is where I need to look. When he looked deeper, he realized life is like a lotus. Even though we superficially experience this so much suffering, the suffering is not the intrinsic nature of life. Dullapanch manusattam. Life is a very great, sacred phenomenon. It's a very rare thing. We saw this, even this most beautiful, not only dukkha, even highest form of happiness, what the Buddha called nibbana, is right within. That is the message of the Four Noble Truths. We start with the suffering, we work through it, we find out the cause of it, and we realize we can be free from that. We have the technique. The end result is freedom, Chetu-mukti. And that is not an empty state. It's like a blooming of a lotus. And from there on, all our higher state of consciousness experience begin to awaken. That's what I call Buddha, awaken. So what is happening, all this treasure, what the Buddhism would call Buddha nature, is right within. Isn't it? But unfortunately, we don't see that. Can you see that? And that unawareness of our own true being is the source of all this suffering. It makes sense, isn't it? So come back to that fear factor. Okay. In the Four Noble Truths, Buddha said the life is suffering, and cause of the suffering is the tanha, desire. Usually we translate that word tanha as a desire. The Sanskrit word is trishna. Thus, it's a two meaning. Desire as well as the thirst. I think that word thirst is primary, has some primary significance. Just imagine, put yourself in a situation where you feel very thirsty. How do you feel? If you're in the desert, scorching sun, okay, and you look around, you can't find something to drink. How would you feel? Fear comes. No? Buddha actually demonstrated this in the Mahaparinibbana Sutta. Remember the story when he was going from one place to other, to where he was supposed to go to his final parinibbana. He was walking with his assistant Anandhamma. In the middle, he stopped and told Anandhamma, Ananda, I'm very thirsty. Go and fetch me some little bit of water. So the Hamdru went, Anandhamma looked for a little bit of water, and he came back and said, Bhante, there's not much water. He said, no, please go. I'm very thirsty. Go and bring some water. So Anandhamma went and came back and told Buddha, Bhante, no water, just a muddy water. Then he said, it doesn't matter. Go and bring that muddy water. What is he trying to tell us, teach it? When you're in that situation, if there's no clean water, you would still drink muddy water, even though you know that may not be the solution. Can you see that? And that's a trishna. And Buddha saw in ordinary human life driven by the same fear. Fear is the latent process. But we don't see that. Now imagine now when you're in that Buddha situation, when you look for a muddy water, of course, if there are muddy water and the clean water, what would you go for? Of course. And then on top of that, if you find the Coca-Cola and whatever, then you go for that. No? And we're looking for something more pleasant. There's a secondary process. No? Then when you do that, we forget our primary reason why we want to drink. Vutujjana namang namang yanti. You're only looking for some novelty. We can't be satisfied with what we got. The reason when we got that, we begin to see this is not the answer. That primary fear is going to come back. To avoid that, we quickly run for something pleasant. And Buddha saw this too. He said, when ordinary Patanjana affected by his fear of dukkha, instead of looking into it, he looked for something pleasant to avoid it. He never faced it. It's not easy. A lot of people, that's what we need to do, but we know in practice it's not easy. We're always looking for something to avoid. So Buddha saw this process, this is why people are running after so-called tanha, pleasurable thing, is to avoid that, facing that fear. Can you see that? We're constantly struggling to avoid that. The more we try and run away from that, we are actually not really dealing with it. We are really reinforcing that fear. Like in Zen Buddhism said that if you're afraid of a ghost, you better face it. If you keep on running away, you keep on reinforcing there's a ghost. Isn't it? So what we need to do is face it. But unfortunately, human beings, the way we are, we can't do that. This fear is too strong. We look helplessly somewhere to peace. But unfortunately, this is not the way. But we don't know any other way either. And that's where the mindfulness comes. If you look at like when you try to meditate, we see these things. Even though we have got the time, we got the beautiful environment, everything. We start to sit and we try to be with ourselves. For how long can we? We look at that, our senses need something. But they said our senses constantly looking for ahara, in food. Because they can't stay without that ahara. Like I need to see something. You need to hear. These senses are constantly after something. And that's the upadana. And Buddha very beautifully defined human nature as a pancha upadana kanda. If you ask the Buddha, what is the intrinsic nature of the ordinary human being? He said pancha upadana kanda. It's a nama rupa, a group of these 5 groups, whose nature is to go after upadana, holding on. So this being can't be without attachment to something. Upadana. We need constant attachment, holding on to something. Because if we take our attention or senses away from the stimuli, we feel frightened. Now you can see why we run after it. Because we're afraid. Our senses need to be hold on to something. And like being in the forest, if there's nothing but muddy water, of course we go for. But we create more and more pleasurable thing to go after. And we get a little bit pleasure. We can't be that. Buddha himself acknowledged it. But that is what Dulu does. It then allows us to see the real primary reason why we are going after. So how would you encourage ordinary human being to stop that process and to learn to a little bit look within? I think it's almost an impossible task. Because by very default nature, senses can't be stopped. The moment we try to take our attention sense away, we get frightened. And that fear, as again focus on that, reinforced by another view as well. The view is we believe everything is just physical. Isn't it? Where we look at, that's all we know. So we see human life is physical, suffering is physical, so solution also has to be some sort of physical. We go round and round that mode of view. Okay? But if you want to, so Buddha instead of telling, it's like, or you should stop running after the thing, he invented, devised very beautiful technique. To understand that, imagine the poor deer in running after mirage, water. As soon as he sees what he sees as a water, he would go after. No? If you go and tell him, my dear friend, it's not the water, it's just a mirage, he would not stop. He might even suspect your motive. You know? Why I see the water there. Why are you trying to stop me? I'm thirsty. Makes sense, isn't it? So Buddha, instead of telling that you should stop going after, running after this and that, this device made a very interesting technique. See it. That's a little bit of very interesting challenge. Take this seriously. He said, if you really care for something, if you really want to be happy, and if you think physical thing or what external thing that's going to make you happy, don't you think that you have some sort of obligation to know what it is? Otherwise, you don't know what you're going after. You think, oh, this is going to make me happy, but you don't know what it is. So if you're really careful what you're doing, if you really believe that going after physical pleasurable thing going to make you happy, I think you should take a little bit of time and think about it, rather than just running after it without knowing. The reason I think he suggested that, there's some reason behind that. Okay. So if you take that challenge, as he and particularly his early followers did, the more we look into things that we are after, we begin to see what they are. The more we see things as they are, this tendency, the bandhana, get less and less. It's like if a deer in the running after the mirage, if you begin to see, even though I'm really thirsty, but what I see is not water, would be run after it. Without anybody's prompting, that tendency get a little bit less and less. And that's how Buddha presented it. Rather than telling there's no pleasure, it's not going to make you happy, not happy, it is just observing. And the reason this, a lot of Buddhist philosophers also got confused this issue. How could you What the relation between seeing things or not seeing things as they are, or if you see things as they are, we're going to be our desire or tendency to go after get less. It's like a conflict. But that's why I think Buddha didn't want to talk about it. He just demonstrated. He said, you can practice, didn't see what happened. So this is what happened when people begin to see, as I said earlier, this tendency get less and less. Rather than thinking about the nature of it. That more practical, isn't it? Otherwise, if you're going to talk about, we can sit and talk rest of our life. No? That is what we are doing. Even, for example, the scientists admit that we don't know much about the ultimate relative matter. But they still keep on going, doing what they're doing, enjoying. Not many of us going to sit and think about it. But Buddha said, if you really want to be free from this suffering that is caused by attachment, you can see that I just briefly said, this suffering is, we know very well, to do with things we attach. Tanna jayati sukho, tanna jayati bayang, tanna vipamuttassa, nati sukho kuso bayang. Very simple. If you take any case of suffering, it is to do with something we are attached. Isn't it? If you are not attached to anything, where the room for suffering? And people, but it's very easy to say that. But our question is, how can we be with attachment? The way I say it, the human condition is we can't be with attachment or without attachment. Both cause us suffering. Attachment naturally causes suffering, but not to be attached is worse still. So we have no middle ground. So Buddhism says that, so instead of jump into this or that, the way to see to go into deeply, see what is the root of this attachment. The first is the fear. We want to be attached to something. It makes sense, isn't it? We are not attached, we feel afraid. And Buddhism, if you can, I'm just repeating, if you can see things as they are, that tendency to get attached, get them less and less and less. What happened when that happened? When you begin to see things as they are, as your attachment get less and less, the mind get a little bit of opportunity, a little bit of freedom to awaken its potential. It's not that if you are not attached to something, you just become like a zombie. It gives freedom, it gives the opportunity, create a very beautiful, healthy background for the mind to awaken itself. It's like a lotus, if they've been always under the mud, it can't really bloom. If you get a little bit of space to how to get through that mud, and then you get the opportunity to bloom. So likewise, our mind, when it get a little bit of freedom to be without attachment, its own potential starts to slowly awake. And that's how the Buddhist meditation works. But first we have to surrender to the fact as we are. We have to recognize the way we are in this moment. We don't know much of the reality. All we know is this physical world. That is where we see the suffering, and that's where we see the solution. So there's no samsara. We go round and round that mode of thinking. And that thinking also one of error. Because we know very clearly that our perception is conditioned by many factors, isn't it? We go after things, taking what we see as the reality, isn't it? Now we can put what I said earlier. We go after things as what we see, and we take what we see as the reality. As soon as we see that is the reality, we go after it. Like if the deer in the thing that is the water, he keep on running after it. So Buddha said this perception is conditioned by many factors. One of the factors is that view. That view is that we believe that everything is physical. So we need to challenge that. We have to see there's a reality other than this physical world. Where this moment, Patanjana, who we are, we don't see that. Let alone talking about the higher things like Nibbana. See, even the scientists don't know what the mind is. And as I said earlier, we don't know much about what the matter either, let alone the mind, far more subtly. If anything we know, it's a little bit of this physical world. So can we blame for human being for being that? We can't. We should not blame. We should have a bit more compassion for ourselves. But that is not a good excuse either. Because that does not free us from suffering. Underneath is a fear. Because the very reason why we go after physical thing is to deal with this fear. So as soon as we think external world can satisfy that or deal with that fear, we go for it. So we had to somehow find a way to convince ourselves there is a way of being free from this fear. Actually, if you read the Buddhist scripture regarding Buddha's early, before he became, or before he left the palace, there's one statement. Buddha said when he was a bodhisattva, he saw this. He said the problem in human is suffering, it is constant obsession with the external world without knowing any other way out of it. And he said, I want to find out a way how to be without attachment. He calls it Nibbana. And that's the most original word Nibbana we find in the Buddhist scripture. It's not a very sophisticated concept. He said, I just ordinary human way of attachment. That's Patanjana. Pancha upadana. He says, nature is to be obsessed. Upadana. It's very interesting when you talk about the people who became free from suffering, called Arahat. The difference between the Patanjana and they don't have upadana. They call Panchaskanda. The only link that they break is the upadana. They live like anybody else in the world, but they don't have that attachment. So the attachment is the root. So Buddha, so there must be a way we can be in the world without attachment. We want to see that. So he saw very clear that attachment is the root of the suffering. So if you can be without attachment, then you'll be okay. And that's what he was looking for. And that's why he couldn't find out through other teaching. There, he saw in their teaching, however beautiful, however subtle, there's a bit of a tendency to get attached to high state of consciousness. And Buddha carried that message to this practice also. He said, doesn't matter how much dhyana you may get, do not think they are beyond anicca dukkha anatta. Because he didn't want anyone to even get attached to highest dhyana. Okay, any attachment to any form of thing, Buddha belief is the source of suffering. He said, always he warned them out. Dhyanas are real, high states of consciousness are real. But if you think that is it, you get attached to that, you're in trouble. You always have to see all those things in terms of anicca, dukkha, anatta. So that is the only way to be free from attachment. Without that is what the Buddhism after. And fortunately, Buddha said we can be. We can be. And he demonstrated. People who follow his teaching, they got a glimpse of. And through meditation, even a little bit of you can see, when we get our attention away from, not even completely, that give a little bit of a feel of peacefulness, isn't it? And if you can develop that primal experience maybe more and more, stay without attachment, you begin to feel the happiness of detachment. But unfortunately, I had to remind, we are afraid of that. Because that fear is caused by our micchadikti, the view. Because our perception, we always see things in terms of physical things. Because that's what the perception can do. Our ordinary perception can't see through. It sees only form. It can't see through the form. So as soon as you're operating with the perception, you're doomed to get attached to things. So that's what the part of the Vipassana meditation or mindful meditation or Zen Buddhism, that's what after. How to develop this capacity, faculty to be with ourselves. And that's a very fortunate thing that Buddha discovered. The Buddha saw we do have this faculty called sati, mindfulness, that help us to be without attachment. Without awakening of that mindfulness, we can't. As soon as we operate on the perception, perception is always directed toward the external world. It's motivated to go after, discriminating and looking for what is pleasant, like that. Abhijja domanassa. We go after what we think pleasant, avoiding, running away from what is unpleasant. But if you want to break that vicious circle, we need to awaken this faculty of mindfulness. That's because satipatthana. The way I see the word satipatthana, mindful meditation, is a faculty that we need to awaken. It is there, it's dormant. That faculty is within human constitution. But we need to awaken that. And fortunately, Buddha found out the way to awaken that. And that's a great achievement in the world history. We know that even though mindfulness common property of all living being to some extent, now that human being, particularly this human body, endowed this with that unique faculty. That may be the reason why Buddhist tradition keep on telling us that even though there are many other realms of existence, far more pleasurable, but you can't become Buddha unless you become a human being. You have to pay attention to that. And what is the difference between human being and animal or any other living form? It's a physiological construction. As the scientists would say, this human brain. You have to have a good human brain to see reality. That may be, I don't know, that may be why Buddha said you had to become a Buddha, a human being, you want to be a Buddha. We have to take that seriously. So what that message we all carrying, going round and round, with this Buddha nature within. And thinking is not happy. So if you want to be unhappy or thinking life is unhappy, we should not be born as human. So Buddhism says, highest happiness, Nibbana is within. So when we say life is suffering, life is suffering, a little bit of it lying to ourselves. Isn't it? Oh, Buddha is lying. But Buddha, through his own experience, said, no, the Nibbana, highest happiness is right within. So we all have it. So what is this suffering? Then we keep on going around telling to ourselves. It's our own creation. With the creation, because we don't have this, we haven't awakened this beautiful faculty within us. It's a little bit of a paradox. No? We are born with that faculty, but we operate on something less effective. Think about it. So when I look at this whole thing together, I think Buddhism is what I always see as a process of personal development. You know? It starts with the strong belief system, belief that we have this tremendous Buddha nature, like a lotus, not bloom yet. We have that. So we start with the Pratyajna level, a little bit of this Pratyajna, as I said earlier. Its nature is to, the senses always need to get hold on to something. And this upadana keep us bind to the world. So if we can slow down that or break, make it weaker and weaker, then that potential start to awaken. So that's the first thing. You can see that very clearly. The first thing what happened when you attain the, or enter from the Pratyajna level to Sowan, the first level of the stream of enlightenment, or what you want to call it, it breaks these three fetters. Sakkaya Ditthi, Vicikiccha, Silabbata Paramasa. Very interesting. We don't have much time to talk about it. These are the 3 of the 10 fetters that bind us or keep us in the ordinary Pratyajna level. Sakkaya Ditthi, we know, is a self-image. We see ourselves in terms of this body, what this body is related, what it can do, what it looks like. And it made of all the physical things and attributes. And that's what we see. So then it makes us very vulnerable because the construct of physical thing is anybody can touch it, isn't it? So Sakkaya, we had to break that. We had to realize we are not this physical construct alone. And really, I just remember to tell you a story. Nakulapitu. He was a very devout Buddha's disciple. He was old like us, and slowly he could not bow to Buddha, and eventually he could not even sit it. Finally, he went and said, Venerable, you know, as much I like to come and see you, I'm very old now, sick. And Buddha said, you know, yes, it is true, this physical body, let's see. But you have to realize you are not just this body. And he said, keep on reminding yourself, even though this body get old and sick, my mind is not sick. And very interesting, one of the sutra called Jara Sutta, Buddha said about himself, Srisananda. But he didn't say that, he said, yes, this body is getting old, whether it's a Tathagata Buddha or not. But he implied his mind is not being affected. And so once he advised Nakulapita to meditate on that, and he did that. And then he, on his way, he met the Venerable Sariputta. And Sariputta looked at this old man and said, wow, you look a little bit younger today. Your face looks a little bit more nice. What happened to you? He said, oh, I just went to see the Buddha, and he gave me this technique. And he said, no wonder you feel so good. And he said, did you ask the Buddha what is meaning? He said, Venerable, I couldn't ask much, but that is why I'm here. I think you should explain to me. Then he told very beautifully. He said, Nakulapita, what the Buddha meant by that, he said, this body or nama rupa together, all just a construct. You look at the body, it's made of atoms, particles, below the universe. Nedang atta katam bimbang, nedang para katam hadang, hetu parisambhutang, hetu bangani. It's just the hetu pratya. This put this together. It's maintained, created by the nature, maintained by the nature, dissolved by the nature. It's a part of the nature. If anybody owns this body, it's the universe, earth only. It makes sense, like how Aborigine would say, we don't own the earth, but earth, the land owns us. This makes sense. He said all this nama rupa just hetu pradharmas. They come into being and disappear according to hetu pratidharma. There's nobody there, but it's there. As soon as the conditions are there. The problem is when you identify it. If I say this is my body, it's natural. If it's this body, then if this body is old, then I'm old. If it is sick, I'm sick. And Buddha is like a double attack, isn't it? The body is old, and like actually our doctor doing now, then it's we identify. If we just leave the body alone, pain is just a body's pain. But most of us, what to happen to us is, it's not the bodily pain that to matter, our mental reaction. But can we blame, if I believe this is my body, how can I be happy when it's getting old and sick and dead? As soon as we believe that, those teachings doesn't work, isn't it? So that is why Buddha said we have to correct out this miccāditthi. We have to see, even though body is this, the mind is not that. At least the mind had the ability to make a choice there. It's up to mind to say, I'm going to be happy or unhappy. So once you realize this nama rupa part of the nature, something that comes into being and disappear because of the Dhamma, then you see there's nothing to claim, ownership there. You can see that the moment even a little bit awareness makes us relief, isn't it? It doesn't mean our aches and pain go away, but that obsession and the pain that caused by obsession, fear, that disappears. And I know through my own work now, when people are not happy physically or mentally, the more what will affect is the loneliness. Because we tend to identify too much of our body and affairs. And that identification is the root of the problem. If you can let that without denying those things, physical problem, social problem, they're all real. But if you identify those things that happen to me and to mine, there's a different way of reacting. And that second reaction is like the root of the most of our suffering. And so to do this all, we had to learn to, particularly, we had to believe that suffering, cause of suffering, freedom of suffering, and the path are all right within us. If you don't really believe that, I think it is very difficult to practice Buddhism, at least as the Theravada, early Buddhism. So, and I think that's what the essence of the Zen Buddhism as well. So it looks like our time is up now. And once again, and I really appreciate Amawatra Buddhist organization. And this is the third Vassana. No? The first Vassana, I think, Dr. Gamini Gunatilakan family did. I don't know who did the second one. The third one, Dr. Chan Pereira and his family. And I really appreciate it's a very beautiful tradition. And by maintaining and supporting this type of tradition, we bring it's a very peaceful tradition. We bring a lot of happiness and peace to the whole world. And as Buddhists, it is our duty to pray that with the merits and with the blessing of the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, maybe all the human beings and all the sentient beings may all be free from suffering, may they all be find the true happiness. Sabbe sattva, sabbe deva, sabbe bhuta, sabbe satta kevala, sabbe bhadrani pasantu ma kanchi papamagana, dukkha pattājani dukkha, bhaya pattājani bhaya, soka pattājani soka,